All right. Give it a moment for everyone to come back into conscious, alert position and join us back at their PCs. And I hope that that little interlude at least pushed some of us back up to a 10 or a little bit higher than we were previously. Um, the first thing I want to talk about though is imagination and visualization and manifestation. And when it comes down to guided meditations, this becomes extremely important because sometimes we tend to feel as though we can follow along easily. And then there are other times when our mind resists. There are other times when we feel like we just can't get into it. And for some people, they'll say, well, yeah, I can't connect. I don't do guided visualizations very often because they don't work well for me, or I can't see things that I'm being guided to see. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. But what I wanted to cover off here is the fact that when it comes to visualization, this is going to be a key part of your Reiki 2 journey. And the reason for which this is a key part of your Reiki 2 journey is because visualization goes hand in hand with the intention. And so being able to set a specific intention and visualize it is going to help you along the way to impart distance healing. Distance healing, you'll find that there are many methods to use. And there are methods to use if you are less imaginatively inclined. But I also wanted you to get a bit of background on sometimes why imagination doesn't really kick in as easily as others. And the key thing that we know from the way that the brain works is that we've got a left brain and we've got a right brain. We've got a logical brain and a creative brain. And sometimes when we're in our logical brain, it's not as easy to tap into our creative brain. And sometimes we are naturally in our creative brain. And there are some individuals who have trouble tapping into the logical brain, and that's okay. And that's the reason why a number of us are better at either math or languages, or more artistically inclined than others. It really comes down to which part of our brain is the dominant one. And that's not to say that we can't create a bit more of a balance every once in a while, or we can't start to strengthen the side that is less dominant, because there are a number of exercises out there that help us to do that. Now, many of us know that the sides of our brain are connected to different hemispheres of our body. And so sometimes it's as simple as doing something different out of the ordinary, something that we normally wouldn't do, or using the non-dominant hand to either write or play sport or do something that we would normally do with our dominant hand. That starts to balance out the activity on the other side of the brain. And so with that, it starts to irk the question, what does the brain have to do with all of this? What does the mind have to do with all of this? Are the brain and the mind the same? And they're not the same, because structurally and functionally, we know that there are certain aspects of them that are allocated to one or the other. But at the end of the day, we've got to also realize that when one is not functioning in a particular way, it will hinder the other. And so in order for us to have our brain and our mind complement one another, it's important to understand where we are, be conscious of where we are at any given point in time so that we can tweak certain things to stimulate, for example, the brain, so that we're able to use the mind more effectively. Why is this important to manifestation? Anyone want to take a guess? Feel free to unmute if you do. Why is this important to manifestation? So in the process of manifestation, what tends to happen is that we're visualizing something in the state that we would like it to be in the now. So we're visualizing something that doesn't always currently exist, but in order for manifestation to happen most effectively, we've got to be able to see it in our mind's eye. Because in the case of manifestation, it's not seeing is believing. It's more believing is seeing. And so in order to actually manifest, essentially what needs to happen is we need to be able to put ourselves in a multi-sensory frame of mind where we've already got what we're manifesting. We can see it, we can smell it, we can hear it, we can taste it, we can feel it. And when we're doing all of that, if we've done that effectively, what happens is that we're actually creating new neural pathways in our brain. We're creating that mental activity. It's actually registering as though it's already happening. And this is why athletes, when they actually go to reach a new standard or beat their previous records, they're visualizing constantly what they're beating. They're visualizing themselves in the act of actually performing. They're feeling it. They're feeling the sweat run down their heads. They're being coached to visualize at a multi-sensory level so that all of this registers as though it's already happened. So that all of this starts to create those neural pathways that make it possible. And so that's where the functional and the structural aspects of what goes on in our brain contributes to how capable our minds are of actually producing great things. And so what I would urge you to do is that if you find that it's hard to visualize, if you find that you're having trouble with the imagination component of being able to create white light, or be able to visualize something coating you, or be able to feel as though this is something that is expanding around you. If those components of that visualization start to become challenging, look at what's going on around you. Look at this, even the stress levels will hinder us from being able to use our creative brain. Look at what's happening in terms of your stress levels, whether you need to decompress a little bit, whether you need to take it down a notch, whether you need to be in a quieter place, whether you need some music to accompany your visualizations. And that's where the Reiki music comes in. That's where, you know, various other elements come in, such as incense or clearing. They all help to tap into our creative brain because they're all stimulating us to get into the same space from a multisensory angle. So it's not necessarily a matter of, you know, I'm going to burn incense because that's the trend. That's so new age. It's more about, this is the scent that I associate with healing. These are the types of lights or candles that I associate with healing. This is the kind of environment that brings on healing for me. And when you're able to recreate that constantly, you'll connect with it at a deeper level constantly. You'll be able to access that space more easily and put yourself in that mindset more easily. And so that's what those multisensory elements are there for. They're there to create associations. When you're able to start creating those associations, you can transfer those associations from imagination to visualization to manifestation very easily. They become second nature. But it does take time, it does take practice, it does take creating an association. Never happened overnight, especially when we were children and we started to see words and we started to see objects and piece together what those two things meant together. When we heard the word apple several times as toddlers, it took a while for us to bite into one, to taste what an apple was like, to see it, to see a red one, to see a green one. before it actually registered that that was an apple. And so as this continues, as your journey continues, if you're unable to connect either with spirit or with your ability to see light or see energy or visualize protection around you, stay at it, but calm yourself into it. Work it in a way where you continue to strengthen that association, where it becomes something that you understand. It doesn't have to be something that anybody else understands or that is somebody else's association. It has to be your association. The reason why that becomes really important is because everybody's ability to impart Reiki, especially from a distance, starts to take on a slightly different form. So Salima's process, or my process, or Asmina's process, or the processes that are in your manual, those are all there just as guides. But eventually what's going to happen is you are going to figure out that, you know what, if I toss in a little bit of breath work right here, that's going to help me open this chakra faster. Or if I do a little bit of this, or I do a little bit of that, or I utilize this crystal, or I utilize that scent, all of it is association. It's all about what gets you tuned in to your deepest self. And how do you then use that deepest self to connect ethereally and astrally to what's going on around you? Because then imparting energy becomes easier, it just becomes effortless. It becomes an intention. And with that simple intention, you start to be able to do it more effectively. You start to be able to do it faster. And that makes all the difference. So it's important to just come back to what's going on in my head. Have I started to look at balancing out my creative brain with my logical mind, or my logical brain? How are they working together? And the reflection that you can put into this is priceless, because this will not only help your Reiki journey, but it helps your mood management, it helps your self-management, it helps pretty much everything that you do on a daily basis. It's one of the key things that, you know, even comes up when we're doing executive coaching. You know, it's just one of those key things that helps us to understand how we function so that we can interact with everything around us even more effectively. Any questions on this so far?
Okay, so that was very well said.